Hey, everybody. Welcome to this episode of the Alasquatch podcast. You probably noticed something a little different. We've got a little bit wider view of the studio here. Just toying around with some different things, different cameras, stuff like that. Hopefully, this comes out okay. I'm a little nervous. I'm not paying for like HD, HDMI, like high definition stuff here. So we'll see what happens. It looks like maybe there might be a little lag. I don't know how it's going to come out. Anyway, hopefully, if you're listening to this on audio, it doesn't matter. If you're watching on YouTube, let me know what you think. Is this mic distracting here? I was thinking about putting it down here. I don't know. I'm still toying with it. As you can see out the window here, which I have to have closed because it's so sunny outside. Beautiful spring day out there. We got about 2 or 3 inches of snow last night. Took the dogs out for a little walk today. Had a great walk. Saw some cool tracks. Nothing squatchy. Don't get excited. We just saw some rabbit and possibly some like coyote tracks. I'll throw them up on Instagram this weekend. You guys can see them. Let me know what you think. But we were able to follow these tracks around a little bit and just kind of see how the animals were like behaving. We tracked this coyote, if that's what it was. It was some kind of canine. Basically going into the woods, coming out of the woods, coming down the road, and then turning around and going back. And at one point, it looked like the tracks like converged, and he was walking in his own tracks on the way back. So that was kind of cool. But I don't think he was doing it on purpose, but it looked pretty cool. And speaking of coyotes, this episode is all about Dogman, specifically Dogman in Alaska. We're gonna talk about some other Dogmen, some Dogman evidence type stuff, but for the most part, we're gonna keep it Alaska centric. And let's get into it. This is part one, the evidence. So, as most of you who watch or listen regularly, you guys know, I'm pretty skeptical when it comes to Dogman. However, there are a few Dogman encounters that I think probably are worth a serious look. Martin Grove's big Dogman encounter at the Land Between the Lakes. I think that's an interesting encounter. I've got his book here somewhere. I meant to hold it up and I forgot to set it on my desk. But Martin Grove's encounter, I think that one deserves a look, a serious look. But as far as any other Dogman encounters go, as a whole, I think the Dogman subject, I think the people that are into it, the enthusiasts, the researchers, I think they need to, as the kids say today, as I like to say, bring receipts. Like we need some evidence. Uh, Bigfoot researchers have at least a handful of videos that can be pointed out. I mean, you've got the PG film, the Freeman film, Memorial Day footage, Independence Day footage. Apparently, Bigfoot likes to hang out in front of cameras on holidays. I don't know. There's just, there's stuff that we can point to and say, well, look at this, look at this. Not to mention the impressive track collections that Cliff Brackman and Dr. Jeff Meldrum have. The last I can recall, I believe Cliff said something that plus or minus, there's about 200-ish plaster casts that him and Dr. Meldrum believe are legit Bigfoot tracks. Don't quote me on that. And in fact, you probably shouldn't quote me on anything. Just keep that in mind. Along with some famous and infamous footage, we've got the track casts. We have some possible hairs. We've got audio, some great audio. I mean, we've got audio from some kind of unknown animal. However, when it comes to Dogman, the evidence is it's almost nothing. Uh, and keep in mind here, I'm not including eyewitness accounts in this metric. I'm talking about evidence that you can look at, touch, God forbid, taste, or at least listen to. Um, I guess if we had to pick a best of for Dogman evidence, the only thing that I could nominate, at least in my humble opinion, is the Beast of Seven Shoots photo. If you haven't seen that, stand by. I'm going to throw up on the screen here for you. Um, there we go. So the best, the best. This is the best. This is the best of the Dogman. The Beast of Seven Shoots is a photo that was taken somewhere in Canada. It seemingly shows a large bipedal hairy creature that seems to have a baboon-like snout and is possibly holding some kind of small critter like a rabbit or something, or maybe a tree stump. The story behind the photo alleges the photo was taken by a tourist, and the person that took the photo, they didn't notice this until they got back home. And this portion that I have up on the screen here, this isn't the entire photo. This is just kind of like the zoomed and cropped in version. It was actually this is a bigger, wider photo of, I don't know, it was like a landscape or something. I don't know. And this was kind of like tucked away in the corner. So this isn't what the person was taking a picture of. It's in another part of the photo. This just happened to be in the photo. And like I said, I'm not I'm not 100% convinced this shows us a dog man. It could be a Sasquatch, and the morphology of the subject in the photo seems, in my opinion, to match that of a Sasquatch and not a dog man. I mean, it's kind of got like a conical head. It's got wide shoulders. It doesn't have pointed canine-like ears, which you hear in a lot of dogman encounters. So personally, to me, this photo screams Sasquatch, not dogman. Um, the most compelling thing about the photograph and the argument that it is a dogman is the apparent snout on the figure that you can see there if you're watching the video of this. And in my opinion, that's not clearly defined. It could be anything from obscuring foliage to a trick of the lighting. Um, I will say that the few attempts to debunk this photo that I've seen and read have all done a pretty poor job. One of the most laughable ones was someone saying that this was a person operating a camera, and then they kind of like drew an outline to illustrate how this was a person like reaching up to like change a camera lens or something. And I gotta admit, it was actually pretty funny because I was like, I don't see what you're seeing. Like I've done the opposite of that where I show somebody something, like the PG film, for example. I've said like, oh, look at this. You can see like she's walking like this. And the people don't walk like that. And people are like, they watch the video and like, I don't see it. I don't see what you're showing me. I don't see how that is a person operating a camera. Um, I don't know exactly what's in the photograph. I suggest you take a long, hard look at it. Download the original and draw your own conclusions. Personally, I think this is either some type of unknown creature, probably a Sasquatch, or it's absolutely nothing but pareidolia. I think it's either some kind of animal standing there, or it's just like a weird tree stump that just happens to look like a Sasquatch. Um, I'm not convinced that it's actually holding an animal. I think that might be some kind of tree stump in front of it. I don't know. And unfortunately, I'm not sure what the timeline was from when it was taken to when the thing was discovered on the photograph. So I guess there's no way that we can like go back and do a recreation. I mean, it's been years and years. It's been floating around for a long time. Uh, but moving on, after the Beast of Seven Shoots photo, we were left with pretty much nothing, a crap sandwich when it comes to dogman evidence. And look, I know right now there's somebody screaming at their phone or their TV, losing their minds because I'm not mentioning your favorite ex Delta Sniper SEAL space shuttle gunner that hunts dangerous cryptids for the government in a squad that they'd probably have to kill you if they told you about it. Who has like a blob squatch photograph with a red circle. Just keep in mind, I'm not talking about the type of evidence here. I'm talking about stuff that doesn't need red circles. And honestly, like the Beast of Seven Shoots here just barely qualifies. Like I said, this is not the whole picture. This is part of the picture. So this is something that had to be basically like, it's not red circled, but it's cropped and it's enlarged. Um, and so it just barely qualifies as evidence, in my opinion. Um, and like I said, I don't personally think that it's a Dogman. I think if it's anything, it's either pareidolia or Sasquatch. But that's just my opinion. Don't if you disagree with me, hey, we can disagree. But that's the Beast of Seven Shoots. Uh, but after all that, what have we got? And we don't really have much, except if you start looking at history, we can find some pretty darn interesting things. Something that always, I don't know, I guess it kind of irritates me is in every Dogman documentary I've ever seen or Dogman video or discussion about Dogman, it's a given that they're going to throw up the visage of the Egyptian god Anubis. And Anubis was the Egyptian god of the afterlife. And he's always depicted as like a person with like a dog or a jackal head. And it's always something that people point to in the discussion of Dogman or in Dogman research. But personally, I think, researchers don't have to go to Egypt to find legends of dog human type creatures. And I submit to you guys, we're going to talk about right here in our own North America. There are plenty of dog human creatures that we can discuss. And Alaska has such a tale. So without further ado, let's get into the story of the Adlet. So the Adlet is a being from Inuit, we'll say mythology. I don't personally like that word. I think probably belief is probably more accurate. But we'll say for lack of a better term, we'll say mythology. It refers to a race of dog-legged humans, a reverse dog man, if you will. Instead of bipedal canines, the Adlet is like a regular looking human with the lower extremities of a canine, like a reverse centaur kind of. I got to tell you guys, there's there's a red rocket joke in here somewhere, but I am too lazy and prudish to find it. So I tell you what, the best red rocket joke in the comments uh, gets banned. So probably. So let's get into this. The first white men to publish a story of the tale of the Adlet was France Boas. Hans and France was France, and he told the story of the woman and the dogs. And I'm going to go over it kind of quick here. And as far as I can tell, this is like the origin story of the Adlet. This is where they come from. Now, if you're interested in this story, if you think it's cool, I suggest you look it up yourself. I'm giving you kind of a Cliff Notes version here, and in the original version of the story, there are names. Like the people involved have names, and I got to tell you guys, usually I'm pretty decent at my pronunciations of foreign and native names, and I'm just going to be straight with you. I gave some of these a few test runs, and it just wasn't happening. So let's get into this. So there's a woman, we'll call her the girl, and she lives with her father, and she just won't marry. She won't take a husband. I guess she's kind of a spinstress type, old maid almost, although I get the impression she's not old, she's younger. Um, I guess she was so picky and rejected so many suitors that she gets a nickname, she who won't take a husband. And so she rejects all her suitors, all her human suitors. And finally, one day she says, I'm going to marry this dog. And so she marries this dog who they say he was white with red spots. I don't know if there's any significance to that. And they have 10 children. So she has 10 children with this dog. We'll call him Daddy Dog. And of the 10 children, and it doesn't mention if she had all the children at once, like a litter, or if she had them one at a time. I mean, I would imagine it takes a while to make 10 children. And I'm curious to see if she had them all at once or over time. But anyway, they had 10 children, 5 were dogs, and the other 5 were adlet. And they had dog bodies for their lower half, but human bodies for the upper half. And it doesn't say what the mix was there, if it was male, what the ratio was to male, female, anything like that. And so Daddy Dog, he doesn't go hunting, he doesn't provide for the family, and the little adlet babies, they're hungry, they want something to eat. So it falls on the girl's father, their grandfather, to provide for the household. Like he's got to go out and he's got to feed all 10 of these babies plus mom and daddy dog. So he takes all of the children and he puts them on a boat and he carries them off to this little island and he tells daddy dog, he says, come back to shore every day and I'll give you, your meat. I'll give you your ration of meat. And so the girl, the mother, hangs this pair of boots around Daddy Dog's neck, and I think what is supposed to happen is he's supposed to put the meat in the boots. That way, he can transport the meat back from the shore to the island. So Daddy Dog swims out to get his daily ration of meat with the boots around his neck, and the girl's father, instead of giving him the meat, he puts rocks in the boots. And when Daddy Dog tries to swim back to the island, he drowns. So this gets the girl really upset, and she sends her children after her father. And she tells them, like, go and gnaw off his feet and hands. And then the story kind of skips around a little bit. And at some point, the father, and the girl end up on a boat together, on the father's boat, I believe. And he uh he tries to kick her overboard. And when she goes overboard, she grabs on to the side of the boat and he cuts her fingers off and they fall into the ocean and her fingers turn into whales and seals. And I guess that's where whales and seals come from. And so the girl, she apparently survives. I don't know if she loses all of her fingers or what. The story doesn't specify. And she's scared that her father is going to kill her children, the adlet, and so she sends them inland, and she sends them away from her father and from the adlet. And people, they multiply. They apparently, I don't know if they inbreed or they breed with other humans or dogs, maybe both, and they become a race of people. And it says that some of them go across the ocean on a boat and become like Scandinavian ancestors. So we're going to get into the story here. That's the end of the story. And we're going to kind of get into it here a little bit and kind of talk about maybe what some of the meanings might be. There's a couple of different interpretations of the story. The most grounded that historians will point out is that the dog husband is actually a metaphor for possibly Nordic whalers that came over. He wasn't actually a dog. He wasn't a dog person. He was just uh, a whaler that came over and you know bred with this woman, or that it's like a fable, and that the native women of the time were breeding or exchanging sexual favors with the whalers in order to trade and obtain desirable goods. And some historians believe that it's that it doesn't represent Nords, and it's tied to older tradition, and it might be like a allegory for their first contact with the Nords. I don't know. It's kind of interesting. Um, One of the reasons that historians believe this is because the story of the dog husband has covered a lot of ground. The natives in British Columbia have a similar story. The natives in the Bering Strait and Siberia have similar story. Natives in Point Barrow, Alaska tell the tale of Oslu. He was a dog that was bound by a stick to the ground, and he was able to chew through his bonds. And he went into a dwelling, and he uh, mated with a woman and produced a hybrid offspring. And there's another story about the adlet, and it's about the origin of the narwhal. And the adlet feature in that story as well. And in that story, they're kind of portrayed as like murderous and killers. And it seems like a lot of the native stories that feature the adlet seem to kind of the adlet seem to represent almost the dangers of both the human and the animal kingdoms. They're often portrayed in the stories as they come into conflict with the humans, and usually the humans win. They come out victorious. And in my opinion, while I was like reading these stories and doing my research on the adlet, they kind of reminded me of the Klingons in Star Trek, where they're basically there for the humans to have some kind of conflict and adversity to overcome. Um, it's funny though, because like in the original story, they're almost so sympathetic, but then when they come back, it seems like they're a little bit more warlike. But anyway, that's interesting. You've got human dog hybrids running around all over Alaska and British Columbia, and even over in Siberia. That entire Bering Strait area, the communities coming down from the Arctic into Canada. And that's the story of the adlet. And I run across another evil dog-like creature that likes to torment hunters and travel the tundra. And I thought we'd talk about that a little bit next. And that is the keelet. So let's talk about the keelet. So the keelet, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, is a malevolent creature. It's said to resemble a big black hairless dog, jet black in color, and it's said that it can drive people and other animals to madness, and often preys upon those who travel at night. And it uses its black coloring basically as camouflage to blend in to the dark. And at first glance, my grounded ass, I would say that the keelet is probably a bear or a wolf that has mange. That's just my opinion, and nothing I've read about the keelet makes it sound like it can or does walk bipedally. But I thought I'd throw it in here for good measure, just because the many comparisons I read that seems to call Dogman like evil, malevolent canines. So I thought, well, there's a connection here. And, the keelet is thought to have supernatural powers like a lot of the creatures in Alaska, but it's also said that it has some weaknesses. And this is particularly interesting to me. And the one that stood out to me was that the keelet doesn't like to hear its name spoken aloud. Now, I don't know about you, but that puts me in mind of skinwalkers. You hear the keelet seems to be its own thing, and it's not a shape shifting evil shaman. But that's exactly where I went when I heard that, because I was told by one of the Navajo Rangers that if you have a skinwalker's name, their real name, you can use that against them. It gives you power over them. I've also heard something similar to that about traditional European werewolves, that if you speak their name, their Christian name, 3 times or 5 times, something like that, they'll revert back to their human form. So I thought that was an interesting, uh, you know, it was an interesting thing that tied these cultures together. And at least in my opinion, this is a departure from the usual native belief that to mention something by name is to give it power and to even summon it. I've joked on here several times that if that was true, then I would have been taken or murdered by the Nantinaq 10 times over, because I'm fairly confident that I've probably spoken that word out loud more than any currently living human being. Just, I think it's true. I don't know, but I'm pretty sure, compare, all the the documentaries, the podcasts, the presentations. I've said that word a lot. So we're still waiting to see what happens. But also, I'm curious if any of you guys have heard about the keelet. I almost didn't include it here because, unlike the adlet, I couldn't really find any traditional stories or references. So I'm kind of hoping it's not made up. I'm hoping I'm not like giving out false information here, and it really is based on a real native belief. It puts me in mind of the spectral dogs in other cultures, like black shuck, stuff like that from over in England. So I'm really hoping that it's a legit legend or belief, and not a made up one, because just it's so cool that it has those threads that kind of connect it to those other entities and those other cultures. So that's the keelet. That's the large black inky dog that stalks the tundra and can drive people mad. Now let's talk about theories. Now, do I believe that a woman and a dog had babies? No. However, I don't think that we necessarily should take these stories at absolute face value. We kind of need to filter them through the lens of logic and reason and, of course, time. Uh, there's any number of reasons I can think of for these legends to be so prevalent. In fact, I wouldn't rule out that many of these stories have kind of been a little bit lost in translation. Uh, Maybe the dogs in the stories, like we were talking about, were foreigners. Maybe they were Bigfoot or some kind of a Sasquatch creature, or maybe they were just like a primitive tribe, a less advanced tribe than the ones telling the story. Or, I mean, maybe there was a little bit more literal than we're giving them credit for. Maybe the events actually happened to the best of the storyteller's ability. Maybe the women were subject to some type of hybrid alien experimentation, and the aliens were splicing humans with all kinds of different species on Earth to see, basically, just to see what they could make. And if you think about that, it could be the origin for a lot of different mythical creatures throughout history, including like Bigfoot, minotaurs, dragons, things like that. Uh, I don't think we should just necessarily just look at that and be like, oh, that's mythology or that's not true. Linda Godfrey, she is the journalist that broke the story of the Beast of Bray Road, which, in my opinion, brought the whole Dogman thing basically into the public eye. And once it like hit the internet, that's kind of where it took off. Linda passed away in 2022. She gave a lot of presentations and talks on Dogman, and I don't know if she had a firm belief or theory on what Dogman was. I do remember hearing a theory, and I can't recall the source of it. I want to say that Linda talked about it in a documentary on Dogman. Um, I hate to be like not being able to point to my source here. I think it might have been a Small Town Monsters documentary. I'm not sure. And I'm pretty sure it was Linda. I actually reached out and I didn't hear back from anybody in time to confirm this. But I'm almost certain it was Linda that said that there was a theory that Dogman was just a species of wolf or canine that had basically become bipedal, kind of like how, Bigfoot is a bipedal hominid. And personally, I really appreciate the grounded, rational approach of that. I like it, but I don't really think that that's the case. And I feel like if that were the origin of the Dogman phenomenon, we would hear about more Dogman sightings in Canada and Alaska, places where there's a lot of wolves. And that just doesn't seem to be the case. I don't think we should necessarily throw out the native legends and stories of the Adlet. Maybe they went forth and prospered, and through the generation, their dog genes resulted in more canine-looking offspring. We know that native legends certainly like to give origins for things like humans, the planet, animals that populate it. Um, I mean, certainly in the story I told earlier about the Adlet, the woman's fingers fell into the ocean and became seals and whales. And it seems like that they love to give origin stories for animals. And maybe the legend of the Adlet is an origin story for an animal that's always been here. Uh, and their best explanation of why it was here was a human and canine union. It was some kind of dog person hybrid. And that's their explanation for it. That's how they explain it. Uh, I've personally never had a Dogman sighting reported to me. I know Rob Roy from the Bigfoot Art Gallery has had a strange, like bat-faced creature reported to him, and Chuk saw something that was strange and not something that I would necessarily classify as a Dogman sighting, but something that he couldn't identify. In fact, I've heard Mothman, Bigfoot, lakes and sea monsters, little people, and even dinosaur sightings in Alaska. But really, the only Dogman sighting that I've heard of, and this I think I just found through browsing the internet, happened somewhere in like Palmer Wasilla area. I believe it was featured maybe on the Dogman Encounters podcast. And I just find it odd that in a place like Alaska that has such a robust history, if that's what you would call it, of human canine hybrid stories, this is the one place where there's almost no Dogman sightings. So if you've had a Dogman encounter in Alaska, I'm curious. I'd like to hear it. You can reach out to me via my website at alaskwatchpodcast.com, or you can contact me via my social medias, or you just plain old email me at alaskwatch@gmail.com. And again, I'm just interested in Alaska encounters. If you've had a dog man encounter, that's great. But I'm specifically trying to find information on Alaskan encounters. But anyway, that's all I got for you guys today. I really appreciate you watching or listening. If you want to support me, give me a like, or even better, click subscribe. You can head over to the AlaskaWatchPodcast.com website and pick up some cool swag like books and t-shirts. Uh, you can also go to Amazon and pick those books up. If you buy them from me, I can autograph them for you though. But anyway, guys, that's all I got. I hope you enjoyed our talk and exploration of Dogman in Alaska. And until next time, the beans abides.